revolution of history. Claim. He orders to raise in all the castles the double-headed eagle, with background purple as his emblem. That was the martial flag of Byzantium. Response. This is the only correct statement made so far. However, the fact that the Kastriots adopted the Byzantine symbol of the double-headed eagle for their emblem does not show their Greek roots. Again, Byzantium is much wider notion than its Greek element. Albanians have the historical right to be considered part of the heritage of the Byzantine Empire. Also, let's not forget that the double-headed eagle was previously used by the Romans. Furthermore, the usage of the Byzantine symbols was intended to express the unity of the free Albanian territories and to show that after the fall of Constantinople in the hands of Turks in 1453, Albanians were the only anti-Ottoman power fighting in the lands of the defeated Byzantine Empire. Claim. Georgios Kastriotis used to wear the ancient Greek Macedonian helmet with a double horn. Response. Another true historical fact purposefully used in a misleading way. Georgios Kastriotis used this helmet in order to identify himself with the legend of the ancient world. In the same way, his title Iskandar was given to him by the Sultan to compare his military brilliance with that of Alexander the Great. Claim. With the illegal creation of the Albanian state in 1914, the unorganized and savage-tilted Albanian tribes tried to invent a medieval history in order to justify the existence of their illegal state. So during the communist era, the Stalinist Albanian regime of Enver Hoxha adopted the legend of Kastriotis, forging the true history and his origin. It was a clear example of newly created state forms which, in the lack of proper history, are forging and stealing the legends and the history of other nations. Response. This is another proof that the authors of these statements have only superficial knowledge of the Albanian history. The quote illegal creation of the Albanian state was made in 1912, not 1914. Second, the legend of Georgios Kastriotis was not created out of nowhere, but it was deeply rooted in the hearts of the nation long before the communist era. Naim Frashëri, the central figure of the Albanian Renaissance, wrote a poem about Skanderbeg in the late 19th century. As far as the stealing and forgery of history is concerned, let's not ignore the true falsifiers of the history. The propaganda promoted by the newly formed Hellenic state of the 19th century, who forged and continues to forge till today the Albanian roots of the majority of the heroes of the Greek Revolution of 1821 against the Ottoman oppression. We admit that these heroes were of Albanian descent, but had formed a Greek national conscience. Kolokotroni, Bochari, Gjavela, Bobolina, Kondorioti, Kanari, Kriezis, and many more fought for the Greek ideals. By the same token, even if the scenario of the Greek origins of Skanderbeg were true, he had Albanian national conscience. He fought with Albanians and for the Albanians. It was him that united the Albanian princes of the 15th century and managed to form the first Albanian reign. Claim. Georgios Kastriotis declared to the sovereign of Taranta, Ioannis Antonio, his Greek origins and feelings when he wrote, in Greek of course, "My forefathers were Epirots, from which Pyrrhus rose, who won the Romans." Response. George must have written to Giovanni Antonio of Taranto in Greek, because that was the official language of the Byzantine state and the international language of the era, similar to what English is today. There was no way he could have written in Albanian, simply because the Italian prince would not understand a single word in Albanian. Again, the term Epirots was equivalent to the word Albanians at that age, and he went back to the ancient times when this nation was known as Illyria. It is interesting how a simple misinterpretation of a single word can lead to a major speculation of the history of a nation. Skanderbeg was talking about his Albanian Epirot forefathers. Ironically, the manipulators apparently used a historical hint that was eventually used against them. Claim. Ahmet Meftiu, the Turkish biographer of the Albanian Ali Pasha, wrote about the Greek national identity of Georgios Kastriotis. The Italian Salvi, in his tragedy play in 1718, mentions Georgios Kastriotis as a Greek. The English Randall in 1810 calls him a Greek hero. The Swedish Barre initially and Rudbeck later in 1835 mentioned Georgios Kastriotis as Greek. The history of the French historian Paganel, titled History de Skanderbeg and published in Paris in 1855, says he is evidently Greek. Response: the mentioned sources are ambiguous, since the statements are not taken directly from the texts. In addition, their historical validity can be easily disputed with counter-arguments. The work of Salvi is only a tragedy play, not a scientific treatise. Tragedy plays are not valid historical sources. Anyone can write poems and plays about people and events that do not correspond to the historical reality. Since the own words of Skanderbeg are much more powerful and convincing than all the secondary sources put all together, let's see what Skanderbeg himself says about the Albanians. A letter from the Prince of Taranto to Giorgio Albanese says, "Our Italian soldiers will challenge you very well and have no fear of the Albanese. We already know your generation and respect the Albanese like sheep." The response letter from Skanderbeg says, "Giorgio, gentleman of Albania, to Giovanni Antonio, Prince of Taranto, greeting. You scorned our people and compared the Albanese to sheep, and according to your custom, think of us with insults. Nor have you shown yourself to have any knowledge of my race." He further continues, "I do not have to speak for the Epiroti. They are very much stronger men than your Tarantini, a species of wet men who are born only to fish. If you want to say that Albania is part of Macedonia, I would concede that a lot more of our ancestors were nobles who went to as far as India under Alexander the Great and defeated all those peoples with incredible difficulty. From those men come these who you call sheep. But the nature of things is not changed. Why do your men run away in the face of sheep?" Ultimately, the very descendants of George Kastriotis' soldiers who fled to southern Italy, Calabria and Sicily do not refer to themselves as Romei or Hellenes, but as Arboresci, in other words Albanian, and speak Albanian and not Greek. The history proves effortlessly the Albanian character of George Kastriotis-The. For any effort to forgery and falsification of history comes to the point that it gets revealed and debunked, for the simple truth always predominates, and may be disappointing to many. As a final note, we would like to thank the manipulators of the Albanian history who posted the videos about George Kastrioti on YouTube.com, because they motivated us to search more of our own nation's history. We also encourage our Albanian compatriots all over the world to study our own history in order to be ready to respond to those few anti-Albanian extremist voices that dislike our very existence as a nation and attempt to spread the ethnic hatred and divergence among the peoples of the Balkans.